Black CEO gets refused service at his bank. Then he buys it. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, back to Malcolm Reed. It started with a sentence sharp enough to split the quiet in the private client lobby. Sir, this section is for verified customers only. The words didn't echo. They landed, heavy and unmistakable, flattening the hush of polished marble floors and muted gold fixtures. Malcolm stood there in a charcoal hoodie and clean sneakers, looking like any man who'd stepped in for a simple transaction. But the eyes around him didn't see any man. They saw a target for suspicion. The teller didn't even mask her disdain. Her gaze pinned him like he had wandered into a place he wasn't meant to stand. A man near the espresso station whispered just loud enough to cut through the room. Here we go again. Malcolm kept his posture steady, shoulders relaxed, as if he were anchored to the ground itself. His voice stayed calm when he said he was here for a high-value withdrawal. Yet calm only made them bristle more. The manager appeared with a stiff suit and a stiffer expression, scanning Malcolm the way someone might inspect a bill they assumed was counterfeit. We've had fraudulent attempts this week, he said, pausing just long enough to let the implication sink in. People claiming to hold accounts they clearly don't. The room seemed to tighten. Someone coughed. A woman glanced away, uncomfortable but silent. Every detail of the moment pressed inward, shrinking the air around him. Malcolm slid his ID across the counter, but the teller didn't touch it. Instead, she recoiled slightly, as if accepting it would legitimize something she refused to consider. Sir, she said, voice clipped, this ID doesn't match the profile we expect for transactions of that size. Her meaning was obvious. Too obvious. A memory flickered. Malcolm at 19, standing in a different bank lobby, told he wasn't aligned with their client image. Back then he walked out without the account he needed. Today, he wasn't walking anywhere. Still, he didn't raise his voice. He didn't break character. He didn't meet hostility with hostility. He simply asked them to run his name. The manager shook his head before the words fully left Malcolm's mouth. We don't validate suspicious requests. If you don't leave, we'll escalate this. A guest near the window muttered, unbelievable. A younger employee, a quiet analyst who had been organizing forms, looked up with hesitation, recognition sparking behind his eyes. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but the manager's glare shut him down before he managed a full breath. Malcolm inhaled, slow and measured. The kind of breath a man takes when he's been here before, misjudged, dismissed, underestimated. He reached for his phone with steady fingers and spoke softly, as if reciting a routine. Initiate Protocol 7. A pause. Then a voice on the other end answered with crisp certainty, understood. Corporate teams are standing by. The lights overhead hummed. The lobby suddenly felt like the moment before a storm breaks, quiet, charged, waiting. And in that stillness, no one yet understood that the man they were trying to force out owned more of their future than they could imagine. The moment Malcolm's voice cut through the lobby, something shifted beneath the polished floor, a quiet tremor the staff did not yet understand. The teller stepped back as if the air itself had pushed her, her eyes darting between Malcolm's calm expression and the phone still in his hand. The manager stiffened, forcing a scoff that sounded thinner than he intended. Protocol? Sir, whatever you think you are doing, it will not work here. But his tone carried a tremor, a hairline crack in his confidence. One of the clients near the window, a man in a tailored gray suit, lowered his newspaper and studied Malcolm with new caution, as if the pieces of a puzzle were beginning to align in his mind. Malcolm's gaze remained steady, not confrontational, just unbearably composed. He did not raise his voice or shift his stance. He simply existed in a way that made the room feel smaller around him. The silence did not last long. The door to the back office opened and a second supervisor walked out briskly, her posture brimming with authority she had not earned. She looked Malcolm up and down, the inspection deliberate. What is the issue? She asked without looking at her colleagues, as if Malcolm could not possibly be the one to address. The manager answered before Malcolm could speak. Unauthorized request. Suspicious account behavior. We were about to escalate. The supervisor folded her arms and tilted her chin, eyes sharp. Sir, if you do not comply, we will be forced to remove you from this section for security protocol. Her voice was clipped, each word carved out as if Malcolm had already committed some unforgivable offense simply by existing in that lobby. A woman seated near the front subtly shook her head, a mixture of discomfort and disbelief crossing her face. She mouthed the word wrong to the young employee who had recognized Malcolm's name earlier. The young employee looked from her to Malcolm, then back at his supervisor, torn between fear of his job and fear of what was unfolding in front of him. He lifted his tablet again as if the act itself required courage. His name is active, he whispered, barely audible, and his balance is substantial. He did not finish the sentence because the supervisor snapped her fingers at him. Do not overstep. Stay in your lane. Malcolm watched the moment with a stillness that carried memory. He had lived versions of this scene years before, in bank lobbies and corporate hallways, at airport counters and hotel desks. Moments where assumptions cut deeper than any insult spoken aloud. But today was not a replay. Today was a test with a far different ending. The supervisor leaned closer, lowering her voice but not softening it. Sir, why do you insist on making this difficult? If you leave now, we can avoid any additional complications. The words were dipped in false courtesy, a thin veneer stretched over something far uglier. Malcolm met her gaze without a hint of resentment, only clarity. I asked for a verification of my account. Nothing more. The manager exhaled sharply, his patience slipping. We do not verify accounts when the request itself is questionable. You are drawing unnecessary attention. Real clients do not behave this way. A soft gasp broke from the corner. A middle-aged woman put her hand over her mouth, stunned at how blunt the insult had become. The younger employee seemed to shrink into himself, shame flushing across his face at being part of this. Malcolm felt the weight of many eyes now fixed on him, not because he raised a scene, but because the scene had raised itself around him. His phone vibrated in his hand. A quiet notification. He did not need to read it to know what it meant. His assistant was already in motion. Corporate teams did not need explanations when the owner called. The manager stepped forward, straightening his tie in a gesture he hoped looked dominant. Sir, this is your final opportunity to exit without further action. His voice projected an authority that did not reach his eyes. Malcolm's response was gentle, yet carried the weight of something final. Your actions are already under review. The supervisor blinked. Under review by whom? The question slipped out before she could fortify it with arrogance. Malcolm did not answer her. He did not need to. At that exact moment, the lobby lights dimmed for half a second, the brief flicker signaling a system-wide update initiated remotely. The young employee looked down at his tablet in confusion as a notification flashed across the screen. He swallowed hard. Manager access restricted. He read, breath catching on the words. Supervisor access restricted. The manager snatched the tablet from his hands, but the message did not change. The supervisor's tablet chimed next, displaying the same message. Client accounts temporarily locked for audit. Internal compliance review active. Malcolm finally spoke, his voice steady enough to freeze the air. I told you, he said. Your actions are already under review. The whisper that ran through the room was not fear or skepticism. It was realization. The kind that arrives slow, heavy, and undeniable. The kind that makes a person understand they have misjudged the one voice in the room that never wavered. The supervisor's confidence dissolved the moment her tablet flashed the same restriction notice. She tapped the screen twice, then a third time, as if force alone could undo what was already in motion. This has to be a system glitch, she muttered, but her voice thinned at the end, unable to disguise the fear slipping through. The manager's jaw clenched as he fumbled with his login credentials. Each attempt met with the same unmovable message. Access denied. Audit in progress. Please stand by. A quiet ripple spread across the lobby, a shift so subtle, yet so unmistakable, that even the clients who had tried to stay uninvolved were now watching. Intently, their eyes moved from the locked screens to Malcolm, connecting dots they had not realized were even on the page. Malcolm did not move. He stood completely still, but his stillness carried the weight of inevitability. The young employee who had recognized his name earlier glanced up, eyes widening with something close to awe. He had seen account types and permissions reserved only for the highest level of corporate authority, the kind regular staff never encountered, the kind that did not freeze without a reason. The supervisor straightened, attempting to salvage a sliver of authority. "Sir, this review does not concern you. This is an internal matter." Malcolm's gaze lifted slightly, meeting hers with calm finality. "Everything that happens in this branch concerns me." The words struck without force but with absolute precision, like a declaration delivered in a courtroom. A man seated near the front, a frequent client judging by the stack of financial papers on his lap, slowly leaned forward, studying Malcolm as if he were seeing him for the first time. Whispering to the woman beside him, he asked, "Do you think he is someone important?" The woman replied without taking her eyes off Malcolm, "Important people do not flinch when a room turns against them." The supervisor took a step closer, her voice forced into a tight, polite shape. "Sir, if you would please wait outside while we sort this out, we can continue this conversation with proper procedure." Malcolm did not blink. "Your procedure was the problem." The manager snapped, the last thread of his composure fraying. "Enough. If you do not comply, I will have security escort you outside until we resolve this mess." Before the manager could wave over the guard, the young employee swallowed hard and stepped forward. His words wavered, but they did not break. "Sir, that is not appropriate. His account is not suspicious. It is significant." The manager rounded on him instantly. "Significant accounts do not belong to walk-in clients dressed like this." The room recoiled at the statement. A client seated nearby closed her laptop with a sharp click, shaking her head in disapproval. Malcolm remained still, but there was a subtle tightening of his breath, the kind that came from old memories pressing against the present, moments where he had been judged by clothing, not character, by appearance, not identity. Yet he did not let the memory take the room from him. He reclaimed it with silence. The supervisor tried again, softer this time, grasping for control. "Sir, if you would just clarify your purpose here," Malcolm cut in gently. "I already did. You refused to hear it." His phone vibrated once more. Another notification. He lifted the device slightly, just enough to allow the vibration to be seen, but not enough to reveal its source. The gesture alone made the manager hesitate, his eyes narrowing in sudden uncertainty. A client near the back whispered, "Why does he look so calm?" Another answered quietly, "Because he knows something they do not." The lobby lights flickered again, but this time only above the front desk. The teller tapped her keyboard in a panic, each click echoing like a ticking countdown. "My dashboard is locked," she announced. "I cannot access any client records." The manager took the keyboard from her and tried himself, his shoulders stiffening with each failed attempt. "This is impossible," he murmured. Then the young employee's tablet chimed again. He looked down and his breath stalled. "A corporate-level audit has been initiated," he read aloud, unable to stop himself. "Triggered manually." The room froze. The manager's head jerked toward Malcolm. "You cannot trigger corporate-level actions. Only executives have that clearance." Malcolm's expression did not change. "Correct." The supervisor's face drained of color. "Who exactly are you?" Malcolm did not answer her directly. Instead, he looked at the young employee, acknowledging him with a slight nod, an acknowledgement that carried gratitude for being the only one willing to speak truth. Then he turned back to the staff, whose assumptions had built the very shape of this moment. "You treated me as if I did not belong here," he said, voice even. "But you never asked why I was calm." The manager stepped back involuntarily, his posture shrinking. The teller swallowed. The supervisor watched Malcolm as if the answer lived in the space between breaths. Malcolm placed his phone on the counter with quiet finality. "Calm," he said, "is what happens when you are standing in a place you already own." The words did not explode. They landed like a verdict. The clients understood first, then the young employee, then, painfully late, the ones who had tried hardest to deny what was now undeniable. The manager's face drained as if the truth had pulled the ground out from under him. But the room had already absorbed Malcolm's words. "Calm is what happens when you are standing in a place you already own." The sentence hovered in the air, changing the temperature of the lobby itself. Several clients exchanged stunned looks, not dramatic or exaggerated, but quiet and undeniable, the kind that comes when reality rearranges itself right in front of them. The teller stepped back from her station, her hand hovering near her keyboard, as if touching it again might expose something else she was not prepared to face. The supervisor opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. "Sir, there must be some misunderstanding," she said, the edge in her voice replaced with a polished caution that had been absent until now. "If you could just clarify your relationship to this institution, we would be happy to address your concerns." Malcolm did not respond right away. Instead, he looked toward the young employee, the only person who had tried to speak the truth before fear tightened the room. The young employee straightened abruptly, as if bracing for consequences he had expected since he first stepped up. Malcolm gave him a single nod, subtle but unmistakably deliberate, the kind of acknowledgement that told him he had not misread the moment. A soft ping echoed from the supervisor's tablet. She glanced down, expecting another error, but instead found a bold notification stamped across her screen. Corporate Compliance Oversight Active. Executive Directive Logged. Required Staff Hold. Her breath hitched. The manager snatched the tablet from her hands, and when he saw the same notification flashing, his fingers froze around the device. "No," he whispered without meaning to. "This is not possible." A client nearby leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms with new interest. "Sounds pretty possible," he murmured. The teller's computer chimed next, her access bar turning red before she even touched a key. "I cannot reopen the dashboard," she said, voice trembling. "Everything is locked." Malcolm watched without hurry, his expression steady, not triumphant, not vindictive. He had no reason to feel either. He had expected this outcome long before he walked through the glass doors that morning. The supervisor tried again, her voice smaller than before. "Sir, who authorized this audit?" Malcolm's eyes softened, not kindly, but knowingly. "I did." A tiny gasp rippled through the room. The manager stepped backward, bumping against the counter, his confidence unraveling strand by strand. You cannot authorize a corporate action of this scale," he insisted, though the conviction in his voice wilted with each word. "Only the board or the executive office can initiate something of this magnitude." Malcolm held his gaze. Correct again. The truth clicked into place with a force that did not need volume to be deafening. A woman seated near the fireplace covered her mouth as the realization cascaded across her expression. The young employee lowered his eyes, overwhelmed not with fear, but with the weight of everything he had just witnessed. The supervisor's posture shifted, her shoulders pulling back as if fighting to reclaim structure in a moment that refused to obey her. "Sir," she said carefully, "if you are affiliated with the executive office, we had no knowledge." Malcolm responded with gentle precision. "Knowledge is not the same as respect." The sentence landed like a soft hammer, not loud but irrevocable. A memory flickered behind Malcolm's composed expression. A younger version of himself standing in a different bank, told his appearance did not match the expectations of their higher-tier clients. He had left that building silent, but the silence had matured into something sharper through the years, something anchored and intentional. The manager seemed to shrink with every second, his voice thinning into something brittle. "If you would allow us to correct the misunderstanding." "It was not a misunderstanding," Malcolm said. "It was a decision. And you made it before I said a single word." A man near the magazine rack exhaled slowly, whispering, "He is right." The teller looked as if she wished she had spoken up sooner. The supervisor opened her mouth again, but another notification interrupted her. Her tablet vibrated with a short alert, followed by a line of text that made her swallow hard. "Senior executive arrival imminent. Estimated time, 3 minutes." The lobby stirred. A client lifted his eyebrows. Another leaned forward, eyes wide. The manager blinked rapidly, panic dissolving whatever remained of his authority. Executive arrival? Who would even be sent here on such short notice? Malcolm did not answer. He did not need to. The young employee looked from Malcolm to the locked tablets to the widening eyes of the staff, and finally understood the full picture. He whispered the words too softly for most to hear, but loudly enough for the truth to settle. "He is not affiliated," he said. "He is the authority." Malcolm did not confirm it. His silence confirmed more than words ever could. The glass doors at the front of the lobby shuddered as the reflection of approaching figures appeared, moving with purpose, not urgency. The murmur among clients grew. The staff stiffened in place. Malcolm remained perfectly still, the center of a storm that had been quietly building long before any of them realized they were standing in its path. The reflections on the glass doors sharpened as the figures approached, their silhouettes stretching across the polished floor like a quiet announcement. The lobby inhaled as one. No one spoke. No one moved. Even the hum of the air conditioning seemed to lower itself in anticipation. The supervisor adjusted her blazer as if straightening fabric could straighten the moment. The manager pressed his palms flat on the counter, steadying himself as the truth he had tried to deny drew closer with every step. Malcolm remained where he stood, calm and unshaken, his presence carrying the unmistakable weight of someone who did not need to raise his voice to shift an entire room. When the doors finally opened, the outside lights spilled into the lobby, bright and unfiltered, framing the group entering the branch. At the front was a woman in a charcoal suit, her stride confident, her eyes focused, her demeanor unmistakably authoritative. Behind her followed two senior compliance officers in crisp attire, each carrying tablets that were already active, scrolling with data. Clients whispered as recognition flickered across their faces. These were not local managers. These were people who existed several layers above. People whose decisions could change the fate of the building with a single signature. The woman in the charcoal suit scanned the room, taking in every detail. The locked stations, the anxious employees, the silent crowd, and finally, Malcolm. Her posture softened slightly, the tiniest nod acknowledging him before she turned her attention to the staff. "Manager Collins," she said, addressing him by name without needing to ask. The manager straightened as if called into court, his voice cracking slightly. "Executive Director Hayes. There has been a misunderstanding, and we were just trying to follow protocol for suspicious requests." The director raised an eyebrow, the expression so small, yet so sharp it sliced through his excuse before the sentence even settled. "Suspicious," she repeated, her tone flat. "And what exactly triggered your suspicion?" The manager swallowed, glancing at Malcolm briefly before looking away. His request was unusually large, and his appearance did not match what we typically expect for a priority client. The room responded with a collective whisper of disbelief. A client near the front muttered. He actually said it out loud. The teller shifted uneasily, eyes fixed on the floor. The supervisor attempted to salvage control. "Director Hayes, our intention was to protect the institution." His demeanor was concerning, and we were unsure of the legitimacy of his claim. The director turned slowly, her eyes narrowing with a precision that felt surgical. "Your systems flagged no issues. Your employee attempted to verify the account and was shut down. Your treatment escalated without cause. And your branch entered lockdown only after an executive-level command was triggered." She tapped her tablet once, and a detailed timeline appeared. That command originated from one individual. Every gaze landed on Malcolm again. The director faced him fully, her expression shifting from corporate authority to something closer to respect. "Sir," she said, "we have been expecting your site review this quarter, but we did not anticipate you would conduct it unannounced." The manager blinked rapidly, his voice barely audible. "Site review?" The director nodded. "Yes, as majority ownership grants full authority for unscheduled inspections." Silence cracked open across the room. The young employee's eyes widened as the truth he had only guessed at blossomed into certainty. The supervisor's breath caught in her throat. The manager took a full step backward, colliding with the edge of the counter. A soft intake of breath rippled among the clients. Malcolm finally spoke, his voice even, every syllable controlled. "I came here today to observe, nothing more. How a branch treats someone who walks in without the uniform of wealth says more about the institution than any report." His gaze moved from the supervisor to the manager, calm but unwavering. "And what I observed," he continued, "was a pattern of decisions made before I was allowed to say a single word." The supervisor's voice trembled as she tried to speak. "Sir, we did not know you were." Malcolm raised a hand gently, stopping her without force. "You did not need to know who I was. You only needed to know how to treat a person." The words settled over the lobby like a verdict too heavy to outrun. The director turned to the compliance officers. "Document everything. Begin immediate interviews. Staff will be placed on temporary leave pending review." The manager's knees seemed to weaken, though he steadied himself with the counter edge. The supervisor's shoulders fell as if the weight of the moment finally caught her. Clients watched, stunned not by spectacle, but by the clarity of justice unfolding in steps that did not require shouting. Malcolm held the room with quiet authority. What happens next, he said, is not about punishment. It is about reflection. This branch will rebuild its standards from the ground up, starting today. The director nodded firmly. Under your direction, sir. And with that, every assumption the staff had made dissolved completely, replaced by the reality that the man they tried to dismiss had been the one holding the institution together all along. Toi with grave N-B-N-O-I dung chwin thun, a with circumflex m, ton the lobby shifted into a different kind of silence, no longer dense with tension, but heavy with anticipation, as if the very walls understood that the moment was no longer about the mistakes that had happened, but about what would follow. Compliance officers moved through the space quietly, their tablets glowing with new directives. The director stood near Malcolm, awaiting his next instruction, while the manager and supervisor hovered at the edge of the counter, their composure thinning with each passing second. Malcolm remained steady, his presence grounding the room in a way that did not require force or theatrics. It was the stillness of someone who had carried responsibility long before today and understood exactly how to navigate a moment when truth finally had the floor. The director turned her tablet toward him. Sir, the audit has begun. Would you like access to the live feed? Malcolm nodded, but he did not reach for the device immediately. Instead, he looked toward the clients still seated throughout the lobby. Their eyes carried a shared question, unspoken but palpable. What happens now? One of the clients, a woman in a navy blazer with a firm posture, cleared her throat. If I may, she said carefully, directing her words toward Malcolm. I have been banking here for years, and I have never seen anything like this. I hope things truly change. There was no anger in her voice, only a quiet exhaustion familiar to anyone who had witnessed similar moments too. Many times in too many places. Malcolm met her gaze with steady clarity. Change is not an announcement, he said. It is a process, and today is the beginning of that process. The young employee stepped forward slightly, encouraged by Malcolm's tone. Sir, he said softly, some customers filed complaints, but they were dismissed before I could escalate them. I felt trapped between wanting to help and being told not to interfere. Malcolm studied him, seeing not just someone who worked behind a counter, but someone who had tried to do right in a structure built to ignore voices like his. You spoke up today, Malcolm said. That will not be forgotten. The manager let out a breath, attempting to re-enter the conversation. Sir, we realize mistakes were made, and we are ready to correct them. But perhaps a full audit is unnecessary. We can address this quickly and internally. The director shot him a sharp warning look, but Malcolm spoke first, his voice calm but absolute. Internal solutions are what allowed this behavior to go unchecked. The manager's words stalled in his throat. Malcolm continued. Quick fixes protect reputations, not people. This branch will not be rebuilt on shortcuts. The supervisor swallowed, her voice fragile. Sir, if there is a way for us to demonstrate growth, we want that opportunity. Malcolm did not respond immediately. His eyes lowered briefly, not in doubt, but in reflection. A memory flickered, a 19-year-old version of himself, dismissed at a different counter, judged without question, leaving quietly because he believed he had no power to challenge what happened. He had built an empire so that no one else would have to walk away the way he once did. When Malcolm looked up again, there was a new resolve in his expression. Growth is possible, he said, but only with accountability. The director shifted. Sir, we have prepared the official performance review documents. All staff will be placed under temporary evaluation pending the results of the audit. The manager closed his eyes, as if he had just received the one outcome he feared most. The supervisor steadied herself against the counter. Malcolm glanced at the young employee. What is your name? The young employee startled slightly, then answered. Evan, sir. Evan Brooks. Evan, Malcolm said, starting today, you will assist the compliance team. Your perspective is valuable, and your integrity is needed. Evan blinked, stunned. Sir, are you certain? Integrity, Malcolm said, is always needed. Clients exchanged approving looks. Even the air seemed to lift slightly, as if the room itself recognized the significance of the moment. The director tapped her tablet again. Sir, the audit team is ready to begin interviews. Would you like us to proceed? Malcolm nodded once. Do so. She turned to the staff. Manager Collins, Supervisor Tate, you will remain available for questioning. Teller Lewis, you will step away from your station until further notice. Teller Lewis's lips parted, but she did not argue. She simply moved aside, hands folded tightly. Malcolm looked around the room one more time, letting his gaze rest on each person who had witnessed the day unfold. This branch will change, he said. Not because I demanded it, but because it must. Respect is not optional. It is the foundation of any institution that claims to serve people. The words did not echo. They absorbed into the polished floor, the glass panels, the quiet breath of every person present. Evan straightened his shoulders with newfound purpose. The director signaled her team into motion. Clients watched with a mixture of awe and relief. And Malcolm remained centered, not as a man reclaiming control, but as a leader resetting the standard for everyone in the room. The transformation had begun, and there was no going back. The lobby moved with a new rhythm as the compliance officers began their work, quiet and methodical, their presence reshaping the atmosphere entirely. Clients watched with attentive stillness, sensing they were witnessing something larger than a single incident. Evan stood near the officers, tablet in hand, his posture more assured than before. He no longer looked like an overlooked junior employee. He looked like someone finally allowed to breathe. The manager and supervisor stood side by side, their earlier authority stripped away, replaced by the sharp awareness that every action, every decision, every word from this point forward would be recorded, reviewed, and measured against the truth. Director Hayes positioned herself near Malcolm, waiting for his signal as the next phase of the audit unfolded. Malcolm remained steady, hands relaxed at his sides, the weight of leadership sitting naturally on him. He did not need to speak loudly. He did not need to posture. The room aligned itself to him without a single raised word. One of the compliance officers approached. Sir, initial interviews are ready. The first set of reports indicate a pattern of discretionary denials. Most were undocumented. Malcolm nodded once, not surprised. That is how patterns hide, he said quietly. In the space where no one writes down what they want to forget. The supervisor closed her eyes as if the truth hit something deep inside her. A client near the lounge spoke gently but firmly. I hope they learn from this, she said. Malcolm turned slightly toward her. They will have the opportunity to. Another officer stepped forward. Sir, customers who witnessed the incident are willing to provide statements. Would you like them recorded? Malcolm shook his head. If they want to share, they can. But no one should feel obligated. This is not about forcing testimony. It is about revealing the truth. Evan lifted his tablet. Sir, some customers already volunteered. They said they have seen similar behavior here before, just not as blatant. Malcolm's expression shifted subtly, the kind of shift that came from recognizing a truth too familiar. Thank them, he said. Their honesty will help shape what comes next. Director Hayes approached him. Sir, would you like to proceed with the leadership evaluation now? Malcolm looked across the lobby, scanning the faces of the staff who had built their authority on assumptions, not accountability. Yes, he said. Bring them forward. The manager and supervisor stepped reluctantly toward him, their postures tight with unease. Malcolm did not rush the moment. He let the silence settle, giving the weight of their actions the space to be acknowledged. When he spoke, his tone was measured, controlled, and unmistakably firm. In a place designed to safeguard people's futures, he said, you treated appearance as evidence and identity as suspicion. That is not a procedural failure. That is a values failure. The supervisor's voice shook as she answered. Sir, I know what we did was wrong. I know it, and I want the chance to learn from this. The manager nodded quickly, his voice softer than it had been all day. We can do better, sir, if we are given the chance. Malcolm held their gaze, not with anger, but with clarity. Accountability is not punishment, he said. It is acknowledgement. He paused. And progress begins with acknowledgement. The director lifted her tablet. Sir, their evaluations can be finalized based on your directive. Malcolm took a slow breath. They will step down from their positions, he said. Effective today. They may reapply after completing full retraining and undergoing review by an external equity board. Neither argued. Neither lifted their eyes. But neither collapsed under the decision. They simply absorbed it, the first real consequence they had faced in a long time. Evan watched them carefully, not with satisfaction, but with understanding. He had been on the other side of decisions like theirs, and he knew how much change required humility. Director Hayes turned to Evan. You will document the transition process. Evan nodded firmly. Yes, Director. Malcolm looked toward him. And you, Malcolm added, will serve as interim customer experience liaison while this branch rebuilds. Evan's breath caught. Sir, thank you. I will not waste the opportunity. I know, Malcolm said. Clients whispered approvingly. Even the ones who had remained skeptical earlier now saw the depth of the change taking place before them. The director closed her tablet. Sir, what would you like the staff and customers to know at this stage? Malcolm considered the question for a moment before answering. Tell them, he said, that respect is not measured by status, clothing, or assumptions. It is measured by consistency. His eyes swept across the lobby. And consistency begins today. The room felt different now. Clearer, lighter. Not because everything had been fixed, but because the path toward real change had finally opened, and everyone could see it. The lobby felt transformed, as if the air itself had shifted into something clearer and steadier, reflecting the new orders settling into place. Compliance officers continued their quiet work, gathering statements and documenting processes, while Evan managed each step with a calm focus that surprised even him. Clients remained in their seats, not out of obligation, but because they sensed the moment was nearing its final shape, the moment where clarity crystallized into resolution. Malcolm stood at the center of it all, not elevated, not dramatic, simply grounded in a way that anchored every person in the room. Director Hayes approached him once more, her tablet filled with reports, summaries, and preliminary conclusions. Sir, she said, the audit team is ready to deliver its initial findings whenever you are. Malcolm nodded. Proceed. The compliance officer nearest to him read from her device. Based on the first round of interviews, we found repeated patterns of discretionary denials and premature escalations. Several employees confirmed there were unwritten expectations about which customers were treated as high priority. A hush moved through the room, not loud, but sharp, the kind that prickled through every listener. The officer continued. None of these expectations were rooted in policy. They were informal judgments passed down verbally through staff. The supervisor closed her eyes, her shoulders heavy with the weight of those words. The manager exhaled shakily, finally allowing himself to face the truth he had avoided for too long. Malcolm remained still. Patterns, he said quietly, do not begin with policy. They begin with permission. Evan looked up, absorbing the meaning. Director Hayes stepped forward. Sir, would you like to finalize your decision on staff restructuring? Malcolm turned toward the employees who had shaped the narrative of the morning. His voice did not rise or stiffen. It simply carried the tone of someone who expected accountability because he lived it himself. This branch, Malcolm said, cannot move forward without a new foundation. Effective immediately, new leadership will be appointed. Evan blinked in surprise, his tablet lowering slightly as the impact of the words settled. The manager's mouth parted as if to speak, but no sound emerged. The supervisor held her posture, accepting the reality with a quiet breath. Malcolm glanced at the director. Begin the transition. She nodded firmly and signaled to her officers. The process began at once, seamless and respectful, without spectacle or chaos. Clients watched with quiet approval, witnessing not just consequences, but structure restoring itself. Evan stepped forward hesitantly. Sir, may I ask who will be leading the branch? Malcolm looked at him with a steady calm. You will assist in the interim, he said, but leadership requires experience. The final appointment will be determined after the full audit. Evan nodded, understanding perfectly. Malcolm continued. But know this, Evan. Integrity influences leadership more than tenure. The young man straightened slightly, pride softening the edges of his nerves. A client near the door, who had remained silent the entire time, finally spoke. Sir, she said, I do not know who you were before today, but after watching all of this, I hope every branch learns from what you did here. Her voice carried the kind of sincerity that made everyone look toward her. Malcolm offered a small nod. Change does not spread because someone demands it, he said. It spreads because people witness it and expect better. Director Hayes lifted her tablet once more. Sir, is there anything further you would like documented before we close the initial phase of the review? Malcolm took a moment, scanning the room, acknowledging every face, those who doubted, those who watched, those who learned, and those who stepped up. Yes, he said. The room leaned into the quiet that followed. Document this, Malcolm said. Respect is not something granted based on appearance, status, or assumption. It is the baseline, the starting point, and any institution that forgets that will answer for it. The words did not echo. They settled, deep and lasting, in every corner of the lobby. Director Hayes typed the final note into her tablet. Compliance officers concluded their initial tasks. Clients rose slowly, with a sense of closure rather than urgency. Evan took a quiet breath, standing a little taller than he had that morning. And Malcolm, calm and steady, watched the branch reset itself from the inside out, not through anger, but through undeniable truth. The transformation was complete, and the standard had been raised.